Hey there, and welcome to this deep dive. And we're diving into the book of Numbers.
Yeah,
And, I think when people hear numbers, they think, oh boy, censuses and laws.
right.
But we're going way deeper than that today.
Yeah, we're going to really unearth those hidden gems, the timeless wisdom that's in Numbers about leadership and faith and how to kind of navigate those wilderness seasons. I think we can all relate to those.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of wilderness, the Israelites, they wandered for 40 years.
I know.
40 years. What's the takeaway there? Besides pack extra snacks.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the wilderness, although it was harsh, it really became their training ground. And I think we can all relate to that. It refined them. It
Yeah.
was where their faith was tested and deepened. And I think it's the same for us today, right? We all go through those periods of uncertainty, those
Yeah.
trials that really stretch us and force us to rely on something bigger than ourselves,
So even when it feels like we're just going in circles.
especially then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even those parts and numbers that feel kind of mundane,
Yeah.
like the census at the beginning, it takes on a whole new meaning when you look at it from that perspective.
Okay.
We might just see a head count, but it really points to God knowing each individual, their value, their role in his plan.
It's like he's taking the time to know each person on this massive, messy journey.
Exactly. And that leads us to, I think, one of the most well-known stories in Numbers, the 12 spies
Oh, yeah.
sent into the Promised Land. And it's not just about scouting out the land. It's about how we face those giants in our own lives.
And 10 of them came back just terrified,
Right.
focused on the obstacles, the giants. And it's like, did they forget who they were with?
Right. Well, and it's such a powerful illustration of how fear can really cloud our judgment.
Yeah.
Even blind us to the promises and the potential that's right there in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because they all saw the same thing, right?
Right.
But their fear magnified the challenges and it minimized God's power.
And then you've got the two, Joshua and Caleb.
Yes.
They're like, okay, yeah, there are giants, but with God on our side, we got this.
And that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
They chose faith over fear.
Yes.
They understood that victory comes when we align ourselves with God's perspective.
Mm.
Not when we're fixated on the obstacles.
Right.
And their courage, it reminds us that our mindset really shapes our reality.
It does.
Because if we focus on fear, we're going to miss out on the blessings and the opportunities that he has for us.
It's a tough lesson for those 10 spies. And to be honest, for me sometimes too.
Right.
How many promised land moments have I missed out on because I let fear make the decisions?
It's a universal struggle.
Yeah.
But, Numbers really shows us the consequences of choosing fear over faith.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the Israelites, influenced by those fearful spies, they wandered for 40 years.
Right.
A whole generation missed out on the promised land.
And speaking of consequences, can we talk about Korah's rebellion?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's intense even for the Old Testament.
It is. But, it offers such a timeless lesson on leadership and humility.
Okay.
Because, his mistake wasn't simply disagreeing with Moses and Aaron.
Right.
It was challenging God's ordained authority.
So it wasn't just a leadership struggle. There were deeper spiritual implications there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a direct challenge to God's chosen leadership.
Right.
And the consequences were very severe,
Right.
highlighting that importance of humility, especially for those in leadership.
And that's relevant for today, too.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how many times do we see leadership just kind of, I don't know, melt down
Right.
because of pride and ego?
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? Throughout history.
Yeah.
True leadership, as Numbers reminds us, it's not about self-promotion. It's not about grabbing power.
Right.
It's about serving others with humility and recognizing that true authority comes from God.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, because, even when the Israelites messed up, even when they were grumbling and doubting,
Right.
God never abandoned them.
Right.
They needed water. Bam! Water from a rock.
The
They were hungry. Boom. Manna from heaven.
it's amazing.
It's like, God just keeps showing up.
Yeah.
Even when his people don't deserve it.
And that's the thing about God's provision, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not conditional on our performance,
Right.
He continues to care for us, to offer what we need, even when we stray.
Right.
And this brings us to another, I think, remarkable story in Numbers, the bronze serpent.
Okay. Yeah, that one always kind of felt a little mysterious.
Right?
What's the deal with the snake on a pole?
It's one of those things where it's kind of strange on the surface, but it's full of meaning.
Okay.
The Israelites, because of their sin, they're being bitten by poisonous snakes.
Yeah.
Right? And they cry out to God for mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the interesting part. God tells Moses to make this bronze serpent right?
Yeah.
And put it on a pole.
And anyone who looked at it was healed.
Right.
What's the connection there? How does that connect to God's provision and mercy?
Well, it foreshadows, it points to Jesus in his sacrifice on the cross.
Really?
It sounds incredible, but Jesus even talks about this later on. He says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him.
Wow, I never made that connection. So by looking at the bronze serpent, they were acknowledging they needed healing, they needed God.
Yes.
And in the same way, we look at Jesus, his sacrifice.
Exactly. It's such a profound picture of grace.
Wow.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And his willingness to meet us in our brokenness. Even in judgment, there's a way out, a path to healing and wholeness. And that path leads us to Jesus.
It's like that thread of redemption that runs through the whole Bible.
Yes.
From the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's like God's plan is just unfolding.
Exactly. And that brings us to that second census in Numbers, which I think sometimes gets overlooked.
Okay.
But it really speaks to new beginnings and God's faithfulness to his promises.
Right, because we've got a new generation here ready to enter the promised land.
Yes.
After the first generation, well, they missed the memo.
Yeah.
On faith.
Yeah, it's such a powerful picture of second chances and that unwavering nature of God's promises, That first generation, they were trapped by their fear and their doubt, they wandered.
Right.
But God didn't give up on the plan.
Right.
He offered that fresh start to a new generation, those who are willing to trust him, right?
Yeah.
And step into that future that he had prepared.
It's almost like God hit the reset button.
Yes.
To give everyone another chance to live into their calling.
That's good, yeah.
To experience the fullness of his promise.
And that's something we can all cling to.
Yeah.
No matter where we are in our own journey.
Right.
Yeah. We may stumble, we may wander, but God's faithfulness is constant. He never tires of offering new beginnings, of picking us up when we fall and setting our feet on solid ground.
Yeah.
His plans for us, for good, for blessing, they don't have an expiration date.
I love that. That is really encouraging, especially I think for those of us who feel like we're stuck,
right?
In our own wilderness.
Yeah.
So, as we're talking about numbers here, what are some key takeaways for our listener? Like, what's the practical advice here?
Yeah, well, I would say first and foremost, remember that lesson of the spies.
Okay.
Choose faith over fear, just like Joshua and Caleb. We can face those giants. We have to remember that God is bigger. Right?
Right.
Second, embrace humility.
Okay.
Especially in leadership. True authority. It's not about self-promotion.
Right.
It's about serving others and recognizing God's hand in our lives. And lastly, never doubt God's provision and faithfulness.
Yeah.
He's with us.
Yeah.
He's guiding us towards that promised land.
Yeah.
No matter how long it takes.
It's amazing to me how a book like Numbers, written thousands of years ago,
I know,
still speaks to us today.
He does.
It's like we all have those wilderness experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's part of it.
Right. Those times when we grumble, we question.
We wonder if we're on the right path, yeah.
We wonder if we're on the right path.
Yeah, and those seasons, they're tough, but they're not wasted.
Right.
They're opportunities for growth, for discovering how faithful God is. His love.
It's like that saying, the wilderness is a place of revelation.
Yes.
It's not comfortable. But sometimes you got to go through those hard times.
You do.
To figure out who you are. And I think more importantly, whose we are.
Absolutely. And that's where real transformation happens.
Right.
When we stop relying on ourselves and start leaning on him, when we surrender our plan to his purpose.
Going through numbers like this, it makes you want to take inventory.
Yeah.
Like a personal wilderness check-in.
I love that.
Where am I stuck? Where am I doubting? Where am I seeing God show up?
Yeah.
Even in those unexpected ways.
Yeah, it's like that initial census in Numbers, right?
Yeah, right.
But instead of counting people, we're taking stock of our own hearts.
A heart census.
Yeah.
I love that.
Right.
So if we were to do that, what would it reveal?
Right. What are those giants that we need to face with faith and not fear?
What about those promised land opportunities that we're missing?
Yes. Or even who are the Joshuas and the Calebs in our lives?
Oh, that's good.
Right. Those voices of faith.
Yeah.
That we need to maybe listen to a little more closely.
It's amazing how this book,
Right now.
thousands of years old, still so relevant.
It is. It's
It
amazing.
gives us a roadmap
It
to
does?
navigate our own faith.
That's the beauty of Scripture, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's not just ancient history. It's living, it's active, it's relevant for us today.
it is.
You know, those stories about leadership, about faith, about God's provision,
Hmm.
it reminds us that we're not alone.
Yeah.
He's with us every step of the way. He's guiding us. He's providing. He's leading us to those promises.
And that is a wrap on our deep dive into the book of Numbers.
Awesome.
Listener, we encourage you as you go throughout your week, take that heart census.
Yeah.
Reflect on your own journey. Where do you need to choose faith over fear? Where are you seeing God even in the challenges? Until next time, keep diving deep.